My 5-year-old son's tiny voice told me his father, my perfect suited husband, had a plan to kill me for the insurance money. I am Sarah, 38, a survivor rebuilding our life from scratch, but I spent 2 weeks playing the loving, oblivious wife while secretly gathering evidence against the man who shared my bed. You think you know the monster under your bed, but mine walked me to the commuter rail every morning, waved goodbye, and came home every night to practice his fake smile. I still went through the motions. Every morning, I put on the fake face and walked Victor to the Fairview station. It was our daily, rigid routine. I felt this deep internal coldness every time we did it. He'd always look at his watch. It was constant, like he had a deadline, a timeline he was working against. That small thing made my heart sink every single time. He'd wave goodbye and I'd head back to the house, which suddenly felt like a trap, not a home. I remember locking the auxiliary deadbolt and feeling sick. My own voice sounded so hollow when I had to lie to Ethan about where Daddy was. The only thing that got me through was Ethan's small, anxious, and sweaty hand squeezing mine. That little hand was the only pure thing I had to save. If you get what I'm saying, if you feel this fear, please subscribe and share your story in the comments. I need to know where my confession has reached you. That morning, I turned from the station, pretending I hadn't just watched the man who wants me dead board a train. I held Ethan's small, anxious, and sweaty hand tighter. We were walking past the big oak tree on Elm Street when he stopped. He looked up at me. His eyes were huge. Then he said it. Just a whisper. "Mom, I don't want to go home." It was the first crack in the facade. It just broke my heart. He shouldn't even know that fear. I knew exactly why he said it. Home wasn't safe anymore. I could still feel the sharp coldness from Victor's hug the night before. His hug was just an act. I had to pull myself together for Ethan. I had to save him. He is the only life I have to save. I kneeled down right there on the sidewalk. I looked at him. "Why don't you want to go home, sweetie?" I asked him. My own voice felt so hollow. I was trying to sound normal, but it was just a lie. He leaned in closer. He had to make sure no one else heard him. "Daddy said he doesn't want us at home anymore," he whispered. "He said he has a plan with you." That was it. That moment changed everything. He wasn't just my husband anymore. He was a mortal threat. I felt like I couldn't breathe. Every single time Victor looked at his watch, it wasn't just a rush to work. It was counting down to his plan. I thought about the auxiliary deadbolt back home. Now it felt like a door I could never safely open again. I stood up, holding Ethan's small, anxious, and sweaty hand. We had to go. We had to save ourselves. We didn't run. We had to go back to the house. I had to act like everything was normal. I forced myself to be calm. Inside, I was shaking. It was a crippling panic. I walked us home, my hand clutching Ethan's small, anxious, and sweaty hand. He's the reason I didn't break down right there. He is the only pure, defenseless life I must save. I kept seeing Victor's face as he walked away. He was still the perfect, suited husband to everyone else. The wave he gave me was always so warm, but I knew the truth. I remembered the sharp coldness in his hug last night. That forced warmth was a lie. I had to put on that forced smile every morning. I had to wave back. I had to watch him disappear into that commuter crowd like everything was fine. I was playing a part, and the show had just started. We kept walking, but I couldn't go straight home. I needed time. I had to think. So I lied again. I told Ethan we had to make a stop in New City. "Mommy needs to get you a juice box," I said. It was just an excuse. I was desperate for time. I needed to rationalize everything, to organize my terrifying thoughts. Every minute was important. I kept picturing Victor at the station. That constant way he was checking his watch. It felt like the clock was ticking down on me, too. Ethan didn't complain. He just held my hand, his small, anxious, and sweaty hand never letting go. I felt his fear, and it kept me focused. It made me remember he is the only pure, defenseless life I must save. I knew going back to the house, to that auxiliary deadbolt, meant going back to the trap, but I had to start planning. We finally made it back to the house. I was looking at the front door. I still had that deep sense of dread. Then I saw it. It wasn't there before. A brand new lock. An auxiliary deadbolt. It was shiny and silver. Victor had put it in. He didn't even tell me he was doing it. It felt like a silent warning. The house had changed. It wasn't a home anymore. It was a trap he built just for us. That new lock made me think of the sharp coldness I felt in his arms every night. He was planning this for a long time. Everything was a lie. I put the key in the regular lock, but my eyes stayed glued to the deadbolt. He was trying to secure us, but not to keep us safe. He was trying to keep us trapped. I told myself again that I had to be strong. I had to protect Ethan. I kept moving, trying to look normal. I had to wait until Victor came home and dropped his guard. The whole day felt like holding my breath. When he walked in that evening, it was the usual fake smile. He gave me that cold hug, that sharp coldness I now knew so well. He went straight to the bathroom to take a shower. That was my chance. I was standing in the living room, pretending to straighten a book. I was scanning everything. My eyes stopped at the sideboard. One of the drawers was ajar. Just a little bit. Victor is too neat for that. Something was wrong. I could feel it. The silence of the house felt deafening. Every time I looked at that drawer, I thought of him checking his watch that morning. I had to know what was in there. I crept closer. I had to find the proof. I had to save Ethan. I heard the water running in the shower. I moved quickly to the sideboard. My heart was pounding so hard I thought he'd hear it over the water. I pulled open the ajar drawer. Inside was a folder. It was thick. I took it out. My hands were shaking. I was stuttering just to breathe. I opened the folder. It was filled with official documents. Life insurance policies. Not just one. Multiple ones. They were all on me. All huge amounts. The numbers swam in front of my eyes. This was the proof. This was what he was rushing for when he was checking his watch every morning. This was his timeline. All this time, I thought about the auxiliary deadbolt being a trap. Now I knew the trap was the house itself, and the bait was me. I quickly tucked the papers back. I had to get out, and I had to take Ethan with me. I pushed the policies back into the folder, but I couldn't unsee the name. I had to look one more time. I pulled out a single page. I looked for the lines that mattered most. There it was. My name, Sarah, was the insured, and the beneficiary was his name, Victor. Sole beneficiary on all the new ones. It hit me like a wall. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a mistake. It was premeditation. He was planning to cash me in. All those times he was checking his watch weren't about the commuter rail. They were about the deadline to kill me. The house was already a prison with that auxiliary deadbolt, but now I knew the warden. I felt that sharp coldness again, deeper than any winter. I am the bait. I must save Ethan. I have to stop his plan. I closed the folder, my hands shaking so bad I could barely hold it. Every sound from the shower made me jump. I had to put it back exactly the way it was. Extreme precision. I slid the folder into the drawer. I pushed the drawer shut, leaving it just that little bit ajar, exactly how I found it. My breath hitched. If he saw even one thing out of place, he would know. He would realize I knew his premeditation. I was terrified. I had to go back to being the loving wife. I had to put on that fake smile until I could get us both out. I thought about Ethan again. He's the only one I can trust. I have to protect his pure, defenseless life. I walked out of the room. My own feet felt heavy. I felt the sharp coldness in the air, the coldness of living with a killer. I had to be perfect. I had to live long enough to leave. The water finally shut off. I went into the kitchen to start dinner. I had to fake normalcy. I put food on a plate, but I knew I couldn't eat. We sat down, the three of us. I watched Victor. Every time he took a bite or made a calculated smile or asked some trivial question about my day, It just felt like a cold, chilling mask. I saw his hands as he cut his steak. I kept thinking about the policies and the auxiliary deadbolt. He was sitting right there, my killer. It made me feel sick. I could barely speak. My voice felt so hollow even when I tried to answer him. All I could think about was getting us away from him. I looked at Ethan. He's the only reason I kept the mask on. I am the only one who can save his pure, defenseless life. I just pushed the food around on my plate. After dinner, I went to the kitchen counter to get Ethan a small snack. Victor went into the den to take a call. I was moving slowly, but listening hard. His voice was low and firm, not his normal fake voice. This was real. I froze near the doorway. Then I heard the words that stopped my heart again. He said, "This week it has to be closed. No one can find out. Closed." I knew what he meant. His plan. I went back to thinking about how he was always checking his watch. This week was the deadline. The tension in my body was awful. I felt that sharp coldness crawl right up my spine. My son was right there. I thought of his small, anxious, and sweaty hand holding mine. I had to move now. I had to act this week. I had to save Ethan. I moved away from the doorway before he could see me. I picked up the snack and walked toward the den. I tried to look casual. As soon as his eyes landed on me, he hung up the phone, just snapped it shut. He immediately put on that natural smile again, the one that didn't reach his eyes. It was a complete switch. It confirmed it. He was performing a role. He was actively covering up that conversation. He didn't want me to know about this week. I just stood there, trying to match his fake smile, but my face felt frozen. I felt like I was back at the door, staring at the auxiliary deadbolt. The house was a set, and he was the director of my death. I felt the sharp coldness of that reality. I walked back to Ethan, needing to feel his small, anxious, and sweaty hand. I only had this week to get him to safety. That night, I didn't sleep. I just pretended to. I lay there for hours. After midnight, I heard him get up. He went out to the desk. I watched him through squinted eyes. He was on his laptop. I saw him deleting search histories. He was doing it so carefully. He looked focused, like he was working on something important. When he finished, he didn't just leave the laptop out. He shut it and put it in his briefcase. He locked it up like it was a treasure, like it held all the secrets to his plan. The same way he put on the auxiliary deadbolt on the front door. Everything was a lock now. I felt the sharp coldness of his presence, even from across the room. He's counting down. He's always checking his watch, always on a schedule. I have to move fast for Ethan. The next morning, I took Ethan to school. I had to look normal for the drop-off line. I watched Victor leave for the train, still checking his watch, rushing to his job and his plan. As I was walking away, Mrs. Henderson, a mother I barely knew, came up to me. She looked really nervous. She leaned in close. She spoke in a whisper. "Sarah," she said, "be careful with your husband." That was it. She didn't say anything more. She just walked away fast. But it was enough. It was an external suspicion. It was like the whole town knew the house with the new auxiliary deadbolt was a problem. It was like I felt the sharp coldness of his fake smile on me again. Now the fear wasn't just mine. I held Ethan's hand one last time before he went inside. I had to get us out before Victor's countdown finished. I got home and the house felt empty but not safe. Victor was gone for the day. That afternoon, I knew I couldn't just have suspicions. I needed real, hard proof. I had to risk it. I went straight to his desk. I took out his briefcase and opened it. I knew his laptop password. I had to get into his digital vault. My hands were still shaking, just like when I touched the insurance papers. But the urgent need was stronger than the fear. I logged in. I needed more than just the policies. I needed to see what he was deleting and why he was so busy checking his watch. This whole house with the auxiliary deadbolt felt like it was closing in on me. I kept seeing Ethan's small, anxious, and sweaty hand. He is the only pure, defenseless life I must save. I started searching his files. I started digging through his financial files. I had to look past the business folders. Then I found it. A history of regular bank transfers. They were large amounts, and they weren't going to a company account. They were going to an unknown woman. Someone named Lila. The money was the motive. The policies were the plan. This woman was the co-conspirator. The fear I felt turned into a sharp anger. He didn't just want me dead for the insurance. He wanted to start a new life with someone else, using my money. I saw the transfer dates. They were recent. It all tied back to him checking his watch, rushing his timeline. That sharp coldness I felt in his hugs was because he was already gone. I quickly took pictures of the screen. This was the real proof. This was how I would save Ethan. I minimized the bank screen, my hands still shaking. Then I saw it. An email still open on his desktop. It was from Lila. I clicked on it. It confirmed the affair. But it was worse than just cheating. It detailed plans. Their plans. Reading those words, I knew the betrayal was total. It wasn't just a simple affair. This was a plan to kill me and run off together. They talked about the money and where they would go. It was fully operational. I felt sick. My husband was a liar, a killer, and a cheat. I took pictures of that too. I had to have everything. I could still feel the sharp coldness from his last touch. The house with its auxiliary deadbolt was a prison built by him. I put the laptop away and locked his briefcase. I had the proof. Now I just needed to save Ethan. The pictures on my phone weren't enough. I needed something solid. I used the computer just long enough to put all the screenshots onto a tiny flash drive. My mind was filled with rage and a horrible humiliation. The betrayal was total. He didn't just hurt me emotionally with the affair. He planned to steal my life and use my death for money. The double betrayal felt like fire inside me. I held the little drive in my palm. This was the proof I needed to fight back. It solidified my determination. Victor could still be checking his watch, rushing his plan, but I had his timeline now. I remembered Ethan's small, anxious, and sweaty hand. I had to stay strong for him. I put the flash drive in my pocket. I was ready. I wasn't just Sarah, the oblivious wife anymore. I was a mother protecting her child from the killer who put the auxiliary deadbolt on our door. I went into the bedroom. I had to see Ethan. He was sitting on the floor, playing, but he looked up as soon as I came in. He ran to me and wrapped his arms around my legs. His small, anxious, and sweaty hand squeezed my thigh. He looked up at me, his eyes full of fear. He whispered, "Mom, please don't tell Dad anything." I'm so scared. His little voice broke my heart all over again. He was begging for silence. And he was right. I couldn't risk Victor knowing I had the flash drive, the proof. Silence was the only thing that could buy time for our safe escape. I hugged him tightly, feeling that sharp coldness I'd gotten used to. Victor was still in the house. The trap with the auxiliary deadbolt was still locked. I promised Ethan I wouldn't say a word. I had to protect my son. He is the only pure, defenseless life I must save. I knew I couldn't stay another night. Not with the flash drive in my pocket. I had to get us out without him getting suspicious. I needed a reason, a way to make it look normal. So I planned the tactical retreat. I went to Victor and told him Ethan had a cold. He needs rest, I said. My voice sounded a little hollow even to me. I think we should go to my sister's house for a couple of days. I made it sound like I was doing it for him, so he wouldn't catch the germs. He probably just saw it as less of a distraction while he was checking his watch and planning the end of this week. He agreed right away. He didn't even care. That sharp coldness was always there. I packed a small bag. I finally had a way out of the house and away from the auxiliary deadbolt. I was going to save my son. He is the only pure, defenseless life I must save. When I told him about going to my sister's, he didn't even try to stop me. He actually looked relieved. He gave me a quick, empty peck on the cheek and said, "That's thoughtful of you, honey. Get better soon." That gratitude was the final confirmation. Our absence didn't upset his plan. It helped his nefarious timeline. He probably thought he'd have the whole house to himself to get ready for this week. No wife, no kid. Less chance of me walking in while he's checking his watch and making calls. I remember feeling that sharp coldness again as I watched him. He didn't care that his son was sick. He just cared that we were leaving. I got Ethan and walked right past the auxiliary deadbolt. That heavy click behind us was the sound of my escape. I had the proof. Now I could save the only pure, defenseless life I must save. We were safe at my sister's place. I thought I had a little time. But then Mrs. Henderson came over. The same neighbor who warned me. She looked even more upset this time. She took me aside. She spoke in that same low voice. She said she saw Victor. Not alone. She saw him bring a woman into our house. Into the home I just escaped from. It was the mistress, Lila. She said they looked comfortable, like they owned the place. It was another violation of my home. The auxiliary deadbolt was supposed to keep me trapped, but now it was keeping them safe. He was moving fast. No time wasted. He wasn't just checking his watch anymore. He was rushing the whole thing. I looked at Ethan's small, anxious, and sweaty hand across the room. I had to use the proof I had now. There was no more waiting. I had to save the only pure, defenseless life I must save. I walked away from Mrs. Henderson and went straight into the bathroom. I needed to be alone. I closed the door and just stood there. The news that Lila was in my house, making herself comfortable, finally broke me. I started to cry, but they were silent tears. Tears of rage and humiliation. Victor had erased all respect for our life together. The man who gave me that sharp coldness every night was bringing his mistress into the home where Ethan slept. It was the ultimate insult. All his rushing, his checking his watch, wasn't just about money. It was about her. He wanted me gone. I wiped my face. I had to stop crying. This wasn't the end. I had the flash drive. The fact that he used the house with the auxiliary deadbolt for his secret confirmed that I was right to leave. I had to save us both. I was safe at my sister's, but I couldn't rest. I needed to see it for myself. I had to go back. I waited until late one night, when everyone was asleep. I had the flash drive, but I still needed that physical confirmation. I told my sister I was just going for a short drive. I was lying again. I drove back to the house. I parked down the street so Victor wouldn't see my car. The house was dark. My heart was pounding. Just seeing the front door again with that horrible auxiliary deadbolt made this sharp coldness hit me. I walked up to the house. I had to know. The whole time, I felt that urgency, the pressure of Victor checking his watch and rushing his plan. I thought of Ethan. I had to do this for him. I had to see the place where my husband planned to end my life. I crept closer to the window. I crept right up to the living room window. I pushed the bushes aside a little bit. That's when I saw them. The light was on inside. They were right there. Victor and Lila. They were laughing. Just sitting on my couch, acting like they belonged there. It was the final piece. The illuminated betrayal. Seeing them like that in our living room made me so angry. He had completely usurped my home, my life. That sharp coldness I always felt from him was nothing compared to the heat of my rage right then. He had his phone out, probably checking his watch one more time, still rushing. I backed away slowly. I had to get back to Ethan. I had all the proof. I had to save his only pure, defenseless life from the man who used an auxiliary deadbolt to lock me out of my own life. I drove away. It was time to call the police. I should have left the window. I really should have, but I stayed too long. Their laughing stopped for a second. That's when I heard Lila's voice, clear as a bell. She sounded so casual about it. She said, "Once she signs the papers, everything will be ours." My whole body went numb. I knew they were talking about the policies, the murder. The plan was confirmed. Victor had more steps than just killing me. He needed me to sign something first. It was worse than I thought. My own voice felt thin and hollow as I let out a breath. This was why he was so obsessed with checking his watch. He had a deadline for getting those papers signed. I felt the pure need to save Ethan. I had to get to the police right now, before he tricked me into signing something and closed the trap of that auxiliary deadbolt forever. My son is the only pure, defenseless life I must save. I couldn't stay another second. I got back in the car. I drove straight back to my sister's place. I didn't even say hello. I ran inside. I pulled out the flash drive with all the screenshots. I grabbed the copy of the insurance forms I had already taken. I was gathering the evidence, and it felt like I was holding a time bomb. I put the flash drive and the papers into my purse. Then I drove to the police precinct. Every minute felt like an hour. I knew Victor was checking his watch, waiting for the moment to make me sign. I felt the sharp coldness of his betrayal pushing me faster. I had to use this proof to stop him. I walked up to the counter. I felt Ethan's small, anxious, and sweaty hand in my memory. I had to save his only pure, defenseless life. I told the officer everything. I dumped the flash drive and the papers right on the police counter. I told them everything. About Ethan's whisper, the policies, the emails, the deadline. I poured out the whole story. The officer just looked at the stack of papers. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, and I'll never forget it, that my claims sounded like economic fraud. He said there was no evidence of physical harm. I felt so desperate. I had proof of a plan, but because Victor hadn't laid a hand on me yet, they didn't care. I felt completely unprotected. He was just waiting for the final signature. Victor was still checking his watch and planning, and the police weren't doing anything. I clutched my purse. I realized I was still all alone in this. I had to protect Ethan. I drove away from the precinct feeling sick. No help. Just me and the flash drive. I got back to my sister's house. I sat down on the bed next to Ethan. He was playing a game quietly on his tablet. I watched him for a minute. That's when the memory hit me. Ethan loves making little recordings of himself playing. Just silly kid stuff. He records everything. What if he accidentally recorded Victor? A wave of hope hit me hard. I grabbed the tablet. Victor was always checking his watch, talking to people, making secret calls, rushing around the house with the auxiliary deadbolt locked. I thought of the sharp coldness I felt from him. Maybe his secret voice, that low, firm voice, was on the tablet somewhere. Maybe that was the proof the police needed. I had to look. I had to save his pure, defenseless life. I quickly opened the recording app on the tablet. I scrolled through the files. Most were just Ethan's small, anxious, and sweaty hand making static noises. Then I heard it. Victor's voice. It was that low, firm voice he used when he was talking about the plan. He sounded so cold, so confident. I turned the volume up just a tiny bit. I heard him say, "Once the will is final, then it's done." The will. That was the missing link. He needed a final document, not just the insurance. That audio was the definitive proof the police wanted. It confirmed the full plan. It made me feel the sharp coldness of his plotting all over again. Victor was still checking his watch, but now I was ahead of his clock. I quickly saved the file. I was going back to the police. I could finally save Ethan's pure, defenseless life. I got back to the precinct, my heart still racing. I didn't even care that my voice felt hollow. I told the officer I had new proof. Better proof. I handed him the tablet and played the audio file. I watched his face as he listened to Victor's confident voice talking about the will. His whole face changed. The incredulity vanished. He looked right at me and said, "This is different." Just like that. Simple words. But they meant everything. He said they would open a formal investigation immediately. He finally saw the truth of the man who walked me to the train every morning. I felt the tension leave my body, replaced by that cold, hard reality of the auxiliary deadbolt. Victor could keep checking his watch, but his time was finally running out. I had saved Ethan. The detective told me the investigation was starting now, but then he gave me the next step. A hard one. He said I had to go back. I had to maintain the facade. They were going to put discreet surveillance on Victor, but they needed me to play the role of the oblivious wife just a little longer. I had to be the bait. It was excruciating. I felt that sharp coldness I always associated with Victor, but now it was from the police. I had to go back into the house with the auxiliary deadbolt and pretend nothing was wrong. Victor would still be checking his watch, rushing his plan, and I had to act like I didn't know. The only thing that made me agree was Ethan's small, anxious, and sweaty hand in my mind. This was the fastest way to save his pure, defenseless life forever. I was ready to face the monster in my own home. I was preparing to go back home, just praying I could keep the act up. I had just walked in the door at my sister's place when my phone rang. It was the detective. My whole body jumped. He didn't waste time. He said the surveillance paid off. Victor was seen meeting a strange man in downtown Bayonne. He heard them talking about a supposed home accident. That was it. That was the necessary physical evidence. Victor was no longer just checking his watch and deleting emails. He was making the final arrangements. That was his final mistake. I felt the last bit of sharp coldness leave me, replaced by pure relief. The detective said they were moving in now. I didn't have to go back to the house with the auxiliary deadbolt. We were safe. I had saved Ethan's pure, defenseless life. It was a gray morning at my sister's house. I was watching Ethan play, and the phone rang again. It was the detective. I knew this was the call. I answered it, and he just said the words. Just 3 words. Victor has been arrested. That was the end. It was finally over. I didn't cry sad tears. I felt this huge crashing wave of cathartic, relieved rage. I just collapsed right there on the floor. All that time I spent playing the oblivious wife, all the lies, the sharp coldness I felt every day. It was finally done. I looked at Ethan. He's safe. He's the only reason I made it. Now it's just us. My painful but necessary rebirth starts today. We're rebuilding our life from scratch. If this story reminds you that you are stronger than you think, please subscribe. And tell me in the comments where you are watching this confession from.